You have been telling yourself a cruel story. You have been repeating in your mind that they pulled away because you were not enough, because you loved wrong, because something about you made them decide you were disposable. And that story is poisoning you. It is making you doubt your worth, your softness, your ability to ever be loved the way you deserve. But what you cannot see clearly from inside the pain is this: they are not keeping their distance because you did not matter. They are keeping their distance because they hurt you. And they do not know how to live with that. In that final conversation, in that last message, in that cold decision, there was a moment where your face changed, your voice cracked, your energy dropped, a moment where you realized, this person I trusted just chose to hurt me. And whether it was obvious or quiet, whether you exploded or you went silent, they felt the shift. And that shift is now burned into their memory. They might pretend they do not feel it. They might act like they simply moved on. But the truth is, they cannot look directly at the damage they caused without feeling something heavy and ugly rising in their chest: guilt, shame, self-disgust, fear. So instead of facing it, they choose distance. They hide in silence, in distraction, in business, because distance feels easier than turning around and facing the wreckage of what they did to someone who genuinely loved them. You are sitting here thinking, if I mattered, they would be here. They would apologize. They would fight for this. And that sounds logical on the surface. But human hearts are not always logical. Some people run from the places where they did the most harm because those are the places that remind them of who they were in their weakest, most selfish, most fearful moments. Some people are so unused to accountability that the idea of looking you in the eyes and saying, I am the one who hurt you, feels unbearable. So they rewrite the story in their head. They tell themselves, it was not that serious. They are overreacting. It is better this way. I had to do it. And the more they repeat that, the more they can justify staying away. But just because they can avoid you does not mean they can escape themselves. In quiet pockets of their day, their mind drifts back to your last expression, your last words, the way your energy changed from trusting to broken, and a part of them flinches. That flinch is the proof that you mattered. That flinch is the proof that your pain registered somewhere inside them. Even if they did not have the courage to stay present with it, your heart is trying to make sense of their distance by blaming yourself. Because if you can find something wrong with you, maybe you could fix it. Maybe you could become more lovable, less emotional, less demanding, more chill, more understanding. And then they would not have left. But the more you twist the knife on yourself, the further you get from the truth. They did not withdraw because your love was small. They withdrew because your pain was too big for their emotional skill set. You showed them a mirror they were not ready to look into. The mirror of their impact. The mirror of their unfinished wounds. The mirror of the way they repeat patterns they swore they would never repeat. And instead of saying, I need to change, they chose the easier path in the moment, which was to back away from the mirror. You have to let this sink in. Their avoidance after hurting you is not proof that you are unworthy. It is proof that they are unequipped to handle what they created. It is proof that they do not yet know how to sit in the discomfort of having wounded someone, stay open, stay honest, stay accountable. And yes, that is tragic, because some part of you still sees who they could be. You see the softness under their defenses, the fear under their detachment, the potential under their running, and it breaks you that they could not rise into that version of themselves with you. But you cannot keep translating their emotional limitation as your failure. You cannot keep saying, if I were better, they would not feel so guilty. Because that is not how it works. Their guilt is not caused by your worth. It is caused by the gap between the kind of person they want to see in the mirror and the person they were with you. And that is a gap only they can bridge. Please understand, this is not about romanticizing them. This is not about excusing what they did. You are not responsible for the pain they refused to face, and you are not responsible for the distance they chose as a hiding place. You can have compassion for their internal battle and still decide that you will not make yourself bleed. To make it easier for them to live with what they did, You can acknowledge that they are keeping space because they hurt you, because your memory triggered her shame, and still say, I will not wait for you to grow. I will not put my healing on hold until you are brave enough to come back and own your impact. Their distance is tangled up with guilt and avoidance. Yes, but your task is not to decode every layer of their psyche. Your task is to come home to yourself, to stop asking, why wasn't I enough to make them stay? And start asking, why am I acting like their inability to face my pain is a measure of my value? The truth is, you were enough to be remembered, enough to be felt, enough to haunt their quiet moments, enough to shake something inside them that they are still running from, and now you must become enough for yourself, enough to look at their distance and say, I see that you are not here, for whatever reasons you tell yourself at night, but I refuse to let that absence become a lifelong sentence on my heart. I mattered. I still matter. Even if you could not stay long enough to show it. Distance is their coping mechanism, but it is also their prison. When someone has an avoidant pattern, they do not know how to sit in big emotions. They do not know how to stay present in conflict. They do not know how to stand there and let another person's pain wash over them without shutting down. So the second things get intense, the second they feel exposed, guilty, or overwhelmed, they reach for the one tool they have trusted their whole life, space. They tell themselves, I just need time to think. I don't want to make this worse. I should back off. And on the surface it looks calm, logical, even mature. But underneath, that distance is not wisdom, it is fear. It is a scared nervous system trying to escape a reality that feels too loud, too demanding, too much. And yet, the very same distance that is supposed to protect them slowly becomes the thing that haunts them. Because in the quiet, they can finally hear themselves. And what they hear is not peace, it is echo. They pull back to avoid feeling your disappointment. And now they are left alone with their own. They step away to avoid hearing you say, you hurt me. And now that sentence repeats inside their head anyway. They turn off their phone, they mute your chat. They distract themselves with work, with scrolling, with noise. But there are moments where all of that drops, where they are lying in bed or sitting in traffic or washing dishes, and your face flashes through their mind, your last message, your last look. The way your energy changed when you realized what they had done, and something twists in their chest. The distance that was supposed to give them relief quietly hands them regret instead. They do not show you that part. They rarely show anyone that part. They have learned to wear emotional armor, a cool exterior, a detached tone. They look fine, they act fine, they tell themselves and others, it just didn't work. It's better this way. But their body knows better. Their body remembers the panic they felt in the moment they decided to step back, the way their heart sped up, the way their thoughts raced, the way relief and loss collided inside them. And that memory does not fade just because they choose silence. Distance lets them avoid responsibility, at least on the surface, because if they are not there, they cannot be confronted, they cannot be questioned, they cannot be called out. They do not have to hear you ask, why? They do not have to sit through your tears. They do not have to watch themselves reflected in your hurt eyes. But that is exactly why the distance becomes a prison over time. They also never get to hear your full truth. They never get the chance to repair. They never learn what it is like to stay and face hard things and grow. They stay stuck in the same loop, run when it gets real, feel guilty in private, tell themselves a story to numb the guilt, repeat. They may convince themselves that they are protecting you by staying away. They may think, I will only hurt them more if I go back. They are better without me. There is no point in talking. And that sounds noble in their own mind, but really, it is protection for their ego, not protection for your heart, because true protection would be owning what they did, apologizing sincerely, and allowing you to decide what to do with that. Distance steals that chance from both of you. What you have to understand is that their coping mechanism did not start with you. Long before you entered their life, they learned that closeness meant pressure, that being wrong meant shame, that admitting mistakes meant humiliation. Maybe in their childhood, every vulnerability was met with criticism, or every apology was weaponized against them. Maybe they were taught to get over it instead of talking it through. So now, as an adult, when they hurt someone deeply, their brain does not say, go back, repair, connect. It says, or unprotect, shut down. They use distance like armor. But armor is heavy. It limits how far they can move. It limits how deeply they can connect. It keeps them surviving, not thriving. And at some point, consciously or not, they start to feel the weight of that. They might start another relationship and find themselves repeating the same pattern, getting close, freaking out, pulling away, telling themselves it is always the other person, too emotional, too demanding, too sensitive. Yet the common denominator in all those stories is them. And somewhere under the denial, they know that their distance means they do not have to change today, but it also means they do not get to experience the kind of love that requires presence, the kind of love that demands growth, the kind of love that could actually soften the tightness in their chest. You are on the outside staring at the silence, thinking they have it easy, thinking they walked away and never looked back. But what you cannot see is how often their mind circles back to you, how often a random memory catches them off guard, how often they avoid certain songs or places because it is easier than feeling everything that would rush in. They will not tell you this. They probably will not even tell themselves the full truth, but the distance is not as clean as it appears. For you, the most painful trap is believing that if you could just close that distance, if you could just talk, if you could just explain one more time, you could free them from their prison. You cannot. Their coping mechanism is wired into them, and you did not build that prison, which means you cannot tear it down. You can knock on the walls with your honesty, your love, your patience, but you cannot live your life standing outside their cell, begging them to step out into the light. You have your own life to live, your own healing to do, your own patterns to break. Their distance is something they will have to confront eventually if they ever want more from life than this cycle of running and regretting. You may never get to see that confrontation. It might happen years from now, triggered by someone completely unrelated to you. But the point is, that is their work, not yours. You are allowed to say, your distance might feel safety right now, but it is suffocating me, and I refuse to share that prison with you any longer. And then walk toward a life where connection does not require you to keep knocking on a locked door. Your tears did not just disappear into the moment. They did not evaporate when the call ended or when the door closed. They did not vanish when they decided to go silent. Your tears landed somewhere. They landed in their memory, in their body, in that deep part of them they work so hard to shut off. Even if they act indifferent, even if they look composed, even if they post like nothing happened, the image of you hurting because of them echoes in the silence they are hiding inside. They remember the way your voice broke when you tried to stay calm. They remember how your eyes shifted when you realized you were being pushed away. They remember the way your shoulders dropped when you finally stopped arguing and just went quiet. And they feel it, even if they will never admit it to you or to themselves. They will replay that scene when they are alone, and every time they do, something inside them tightens. So they do what they always do. They push it down. They turn the volume down on that echo. They tell themselves, it wasn't that bad. They are overreacting. It had to be this way. But those are just excuses they stack on top of the memory, not a delete button. Your tears are still underneath every layer of justification they build, vibrating like a frequency they cannot fully escape. They scroll past your name and pretend not to care. They see a reminder of you and act like it is nothing. They keep their face straight and their tone flat, but their body reacts, a little sting in the chest, a hollow drop in the stomach, a flash of discomfort. They quickly numb by switching apps, changing the song, going out, laughing louder, anything to drown out the sound of what they did to you. You are on the other side, convincing yourself that their silence means they feel nothing, that if they could really go this quiet after watching you fall apart, then clearly you never mattered. And that belief is breaking you more than the ending itself, because it makes you question your entire reality. You start wondering if you imagined the connection, if you misread every moment, if all that tenderness you saw was fake. But the truth is, it is entirely possible for someone to care and still not have the emotional capacity to face the impact of their actions. They can feel their own version of pain and still choose avoidance over accountability. They can be haunted by the memory of your tears and still stay away because they do not know how to come back without being swallowed by guilt. When they saw you hurt, something in them collapsed for a second. They may have looked cold, defensive, distant on the surface. But it is rarely that simple inside. Part of them wanted to reach out and fix it. Part of them wanted to say, I know I hurt you. I don't know how to do this right, but I care. And then another part, the louder wounded part, panicked and shut the door. That is the part that learned long ago that big emotions are dangerous. That pain means blame. That admitting fault means being crushed. So instead of walking toward you, they walked away from the scene of the crime, hoping distance would silence the echo. But silence is not a cure. Silence is just a bigger room for the echo to bounce around in. They might go days or weeks without consciously thinking of you. And then suddenly, a random trigger brings you rushing back. A joke you used to tell, a song you played, a place you went together, or simply a quiet night where there is nowhere left to run inside their own mind. And there it is again, the look on your face, the way you said, okay, when nothing was okay, the way your voice sounded small when you tried to be strong. That is what their nervous system is carrying, even while their behavior screams distance. And no, this does not mean you should romanticize them. This does not mean you should wait for the day they finally admit how much it affected them. This does not mean that their internal battle somehow cancels out the damage done to you. Your healing cannot depend on proof that they are hurting too, but it does mean you can stop telling yourself the lie, that your tears meant nothing, that your reaction was dramatic, that your pain was invisible. It was not invisible. It was the very reason they ran, because staying would have forced them to sit in the discomfort of seeing their reflection in your broken expression, and they do not yet have the tools to hold that. So they hide, they pretend, they stay quiet. They may even act annoyed if your name comes up, like they are over it, like you were too much. But that is often just another layer of protection over their own shame. It is easier to paint you as emotional than to admit they were careless with your heart. So when you find yourself spinning with questions in the middle of the night, asking, did I ever matter? Did they feel anything at all? I want you to remember this. Your tears left an imprint. They did not bounce off a stone. They hit a human being who is at war with their own capacity to feel. That war is theirs to fight. Their silence is not a verdict on your value. It is a snapshot of their emotional limits. Your job now is not to keep shouting into that silence, trying to get a response. Your job is to turn back toward the part of you that is still standing in that moment, frozen in disbelief, and take her hand. Tell her, you were not crazy. You were not too much. Your tears were real. Your love was real. And just because they chose distance does not mean your heart does not echo in theirs. You have been pouring your heart into a ghost, chasing a version of them that lives only in your mind, the version who comes back humbled, the version who says all the right words, the version who suddenly understands your worth and their own damage and vows to show up differently. And every time reality doesn't match that fantasy, you don't question the fantasy. You question yourself. You think, maybe I'm not patient enough. Maybe I'm not loving enough. Maybe if I just hold on a little longer, they will finally become who I know they can be. And without realizing it, you make their potential your project and their healing your responsibility. You cannot see that every time you do this, you are abandoning the only person you are actually responsible for, yourself. You are ignoring the real them, the one who is keeping distance, the one who avoids hard conversations, the one who feels guilty but chooses silence anyway, the one who is showing you, not through words but through actions, that they do not have the emotional capacity right now to get you what you need. And instead of taking that as information, you turn it into a challenge. You say, I can love them into readiness. I can support them into accountability. I can be so understanding, so forgiving, so patient that they will have no choice but to transform. But love does not work like that. Their wounds are not clay in your hands. Their patterns are not puzzles for you to solve. Their avoidance was not created by you, and it will not be cured by you. When you keep chasing the version of them you wish existed, you stop being in a relationship with the person in front of you and enter a relationship with your imagination. You start rewriting every painful moment to fit your hope. They go silent for days, and instead of saying, "This hurts, and this is not okay for me," you say, "They're overwhelmed, they need space. They'll come back when they're ready." They dismiss your feelings, and instead of saying, "I need emotional safety," you say, "They're just scared. They don't know any better. I have to be more understanding." You twist every red flag into a sign that you simply need to try harder, and slowly, quietly, you disappear. Your needs get softer, your voice gets quieter, your standards get lower, because in your mind, their healing is on the other side of your sacrifice. What you don't see is that this dynamic doesn't just hurt you, it also enables them. As long as you run after their potential, they never have to face their reality. As long as you stay explaining, waiting, cushioning the impact of their behavior, they never truly feel the consequences of their distance. They get to keep both their patterns and your presence. No one is asking them to upgrade, because you keep adjusting downward to stay. And here is the hardest truth. The version of them you are in love with, the one who communicates openly, who takes responsibility, who turns back and says, "I hurt you and I want to do better," that version would never ask you to destroy yourself to prove your love. The real them, right now, is asking that, not with words, but with behavior. Every time they hurt you and avoid repair, every time they disappear instead of leaning in, every time they choose comfort over courage, they are asking you to love them more than you love your own peace. And you have been saying yes, thinking that your yes is noble, but a love that requires you to constantly betray yourself is not love. It is self-abandonment dressed up as devotion. You cannot heal someone who is committed to their hiding place. You cannot drag someone into emotional growth by walking deeper into your own hurt. Healing is uncomfortable. It demands honesty, humility, accountability. And if they are not choosing that for themselves, nothing you do can force it to happen. You can inspire someone. You can mirror truth back to them. You can offer a safe space for growth. But you cannot be the reason they finally decide to look in the mirror. That decision has to sprout from inside them, and often, it only grows when there is enough discomfort, enough consequences, enough loss that staying the same hurts more than changing. Your role is not to protect them from that discomfort. Your role is to protect your own heart while life teaches them whatever lessons they have been avoiding. When you stop chasing the fantasy of who they could be, you start seeing clearly who they are right now, not as a monster, not as a savior, but as a human being with very real limitations, a human being who may care on some level, but not enough to confront their fear, their guilt, or their avoidance. And that clarity will hurt. It will feel like grieving a person who never fully existed, because in many ways, you are grieving the future you built in your mind, the apologies you never got, the changes you never saw, the soft, safe version of them that you kept waiting for. But that grief is necessary. It is the ground you have to walk through to get back to yourself. You will have moments where you think, if I let go of this fantasy, what if they finally change with someone else? What if I do all this work to heal and they become the partner I always needed, but for another person? And that thought will tempt you to hold on longer, to keep your heart on lie away in their story. But understand, if their growth requires you to keep suffering indefinitely, then it is not growth, it is delay. If and when they do change, it will be because something inside them finally woke up, not because you twisted yourself in the smallest, softest, most understanding version of you. Your job is not to be the reason they transform. Your job is to be the reason you do. To look at the way you kept chasing who they could be and ask, where did I learn to value potential more than reality? Where did I learn to stay where I am not fully met? Where did I learn to confuse suffering with love? And then begin the slow, brave work of rewriting those lessons inside you, one choice at a time, stepping back from what hurts, standing up for what you feel, choosing partners who show up, not just promise they will someday. Their distance sits there in your life like a wound that won't close, and there are days it feels like it is the only thing you can see. You wake up with that ache in your chest. You go to bed with unanswered questions echoing in your mind. Everything reminds you of what you lost, of what they didn't say, of what never got the chance to heal. And slowly, if you are not careful, you start to build your whole identity around that pain. You start telling yourself, I am the one people leave. I am the one who is too much. I am the one who wasn't worth staying for. And that story begins to break you from the inside out. Every time you repeat it, you carve it deeper into your nervous system. And without even realizing it, you start living like a broken thing. You stop asking for what you need. You lower your standards. You expect abandonment as if it is inevitable. And that expectation becomes a lens through which you see yourself and every new connection. But there is another path hidden inside this same experience, a path where their distance does not become the proof that you are unworthy, but the catalyst that wakes you up to how deeply you deserve to be loved. And the difference between those two paths is not what they do. It is what you decide to do with what they already did. Their distance is not neutral. It is painful. It is real. But what it means in the long run is not fixed. You get to decide whether it is the chapter that convinced you to give up on love or the chapter that finally pushed you to stop giving your heart to people who cannot hold it. When you let their distance break you, you hand them a power they were never meant to have. You let their emotional limitations become the measurement of your worth. You let one person's inability to stay become the final word on what you deserve. So every time the pain flares up, you respond by shrinking a little more. You say yes when you want to say no. You accept half effort. You tolerate confusion. You cling to anyone who gives you crumbs of attention because the voice in your head whispers, this is better than being alone again. That is what it looks like when their distance breaks you. Your life becomes a reaction, not a choice. Your boundaries soften, not because you are kind, but because you are scared. Your dreams get quieter because you are tired of hoping, and slowly, quietly, you start living in a cage built out of one person's absence. But the door of that cage is not locked from the outside. It is hinged on belief, on what you tell yourself when the memories hit, on what you decide to do with the pain that was forced into your hands. The same distance that could break you can also build you, if you are willing to let it show you where you have been abandoning yourself, instead of only where they abandoned you. When the shock softens and the grief starts to breathe, you can begin asking different questions. Instead of, why wasn't I enough for them? You ask, why was I so willing to make them my whole world? Instead of, why did they pull away? You ask, where did I ignore the moments my body told me this wasn't safe? Instead of, how could they hurt me like that? You ask, how did I learn to accept more hurt than love and call it normal? These questions are not about blame, they are about power. They move you from a place of being the victim of their distance to being the author of your own healing. They help you see that this situation, as painful as it is also an X-ray of your patterns, your fears, your deepest beliefs about love. And once those are visible, you can start to change them. Building from this does not mean pretending it did not hurt. It means allowing the hurt to become a teacher. You let the nights you cried remind you how deeply you are capable of loving. You let the disappointment show you where you overextended your empathy and underprotected your heart. You let the loneliness teach you how to be with yourself without abandoning you the way they did. You learn to sit with your own emotions the way you wish they had sat with theirs. You begin to become the presence you were begging them to be. And that shift is not just poetic, it is practical. It changes how you move, how you choose, how you speak to yourself. You start saying things like, I deserve clarity, not confusion. I deserve effort, not excuses. I deserve to be with someone whose instinct is to repair, not to run. And every time you honor those truths in your actions, you are taking bricks from the wall their distance built and using them to build a foundation under your own feet. Their distance can also build you by forcing you to reclaim parts of your life you handed over without noticing. Maybe you stopped focusing on your passions, your growth, your friendships, because everything revolved around their availability. Now, with that availability gone, there is empty space. And at first that space feels like a punishment, an echoing emptiness where they used to be. But over time, if you let it, that space can become possibility, room for you to explore who you are outside of being the one who is always waiting, room for you to rebuild routines that nourish you, room for you to remember that you are not just someone who got hurt, you are also someone who can heal, who can create, who can choose. The life you build from this pain can be one where you no longer chase people who are running from themselves, one where you recognize avoidance sooner and choose to step back instead of leaning in harder. There will be days when it still feels like it is breaking you, days when you hear a song or pass a place and your chest tightens, and you wonder if you are actually moving forward at all. Those days do not mean you have failed. They mean you are human. Building from pain does not mean you never feel it again. It means that even when it hits, you talk to yourself differently. Instead of saying, "See, I will never get over this," you say, "This still hurts and I am still moving." Instead of saying, "Their distance proves I am unlovable," you say, "Their distance reflects where they are, not who I am." And in that small but powerful shift, you are choosing again and again not to let their absence define your story. The same storm that could have drowned you becomes the reason you learned how to swim. The same wound that could have stayed open becomes the scar that reminds you how much you survived. And the same distance that once felt like the end of everything becomes the doorway through which you walk back into yourself. A little wiser, a little stronger, and a lot more unwilling to ever let someone else's avoidance decide your value again.